Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, coming back to you with another video. And this video is Black Women in Animation, Our Experience. And just to let you know, as we continue to say Black women in this panel, it will be Womxn. So I would like to first start off and have everyone introduce themselves and provide your pronouns. We can start with Monique.
Yes, so my name is Monique. My pronouns are she, her. I am the co-founder of Diverse Tunes, which is a traveling animation panel series highlighting the need for diversity in the animation community. I also am a podcast host. My podcast is called Simple Robotics, and that's where I am exploring the animation industry from my career journey. I have people that also work in the industry and just friends to casually talk about animation. And then I work as a production assistant also in the studio.
Dawn?
Hi, I'm Dawn Turner. I work as a producer in actually animation and also visual effects. I go back and forth. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. Oh, she, her, my pronoun. I've been in the industry for 20 years now. It's been very interesting. I'm originally from Chicago and I moved to Los Angeles to pursue this career. I've worked on a lot of big films as well as small shows, big and small. And I think that's about it. That's all I can think of at the moment.
Jaren?
Oh, she's
You're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry, guys. I'm Jen. Everybody calls me Jay. I am a freelance illustrator, animator, and I'm not currently attached to a studio right now.
Okay, August.
My name is August Alondra Davies. I am gender fluid, them, they. I'm an animation supervisor at Sony Interactive Entertainment America. I've been in the industry for 32 years. I lived and presented as male for 28 of those. I think that's important to say. I don't consider myself a good ally. I'm working on being a better ally. And I acknowledge my complexion and gender privilege for the majority of my career.
And I am Deborah Anderson. I am a 3D modeler, still currently job searching, but I also have a Black Woman Animator on the side, where it's a YouTube channel where I discuss topics in the animation industry and include gender and race. And I interview a lot of Black people in the animation industry. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, and then moved to LA in February from New Orleans after 12 years in New Orleans. So that is us. That is our panel. So I would like to get started. Whoever wants to go first, what has your experience been in the animation industry, around the camaraderie of the animation industry, and then if you want to go into the camaraderie among Black women?
Like, who goes first?
Well, I'll start. I just something that's cool, because I've had an interesting journey of in the animation industry. My first job was in South Korea, working at Digital Animation, working on Family Guy and stuff. So my first job was working with a bunch of Koreans. I wasn't fluent in Korean, so we would use a lot of hand gesture and broken English and broken Korean. And so that was kind of a embracing situation, but it was also a detached situation because I could not fully speak the language. But I still made friends with my coworkers. And then coming back to America and working at Turbo Squid, a lot of my career has been in New Orleans, where there's not a prevalent animation industry, and trying to make my way. And so making friends has mostly been online, and friending any Black person in animation, and then finally meeting them when I moved to LA, or finally meeting them when they come to a Comic-Con in New Orleans when I lived there. So the camaraderie has been cool to be able to connect with these people. And two big people for me are Andre Rodriguez, and because I just met him in like October, November, and now we thick as thieves. And Kevin Palmer, who I was Facebook friends with for maybe like 3 years, and we just met when I moved to Los Angeles. And I was like, yeah, Detroit. So that's my camaraderie. And then with Black women, it's just, we just, Black women in the Black community, we just support each other. We got our little group chats and be uplifting each other and complaining. So anybody else want to go next?
Well, I will say that I've been in industry a long enough time to be able to say that when I first started out, a lot of times I was the only woman and minority in the room, double whammy. And it's been quite an interesting experience. I definitely, on the level that I am as a producer, climbing all the way to the level that I'm at. The higher I got, definitely nobody else. I am the only one in the room, definitely. And it's been, I've had some interesting experiences. I'll tell you what was really interesting to me. This is many, many years ago. I got hired to work at Sony on a show called The Boondocks, and I was really excited, about that. And I thought, oh, well, this is going to be great. There are going to be people like me there. I'm so excited. So I get hired, then I go I start. And the first thing I notice is that there are no people like me on the show. And I'm like, where are all the people like me? I don't understand. Because it was a comic strip first. I used to, read the comic strips when I was in, Chicago, and it was totally based on, that culture, So I just knew that the people who were going to be working on the show were going to be people of that culture. Nope. So what I found was it was me. There was another woman who was also a Black African American, and then they had hired only maybe a month or two before I started a lead character artist who was African American, only because he wasn't there initially. They hired him initially because Aaron Magruder basically found him on the streets of New York, loved his work, and brought him in and said, I want this guy to be in, the lead character artist, because they did have already a lead character artist, a Jewish guy who was really actually very good at what he did. And he had gone through the corporate, ropes of, getting to where he was. So he understood the whole corporate structure and politics and all of that kind of stuff, and being able to turn things around quickly within a certain amount of time. He was well trained. That's what I'm trying to say. Whereas this guy was off the streets, never worked in corporate America at all, had no kind of sense of what that meant, would take 3-hour lunch breaks, and would just do things. But his work was really good. So as a manager at that time, I was a manager at that time, trying to reel the New York guy in, and to get him to stop taking 3-hour lunches and things like that were very difficult. But his work was so good, and his work was they actually struck a balance between the two, because the one knew how to get things done in the time that needed to be done, and would also be able to teach the other guy. So I think they kind of paired them together, so one could teach the other. The guy from New York had the urban, style that Aaron was looking for. But the guy, the Jewish guy, was the guy that knew everything, about how to get it done, and to get it done, in a timely manner, so it was very challenging, but it was a fun show to work on. It's just that I felt like, given the content, the subject matter, um, African Americans weren't being represented, behind the scenes. And I'm pretty sure that most people watching that show didn't understand that. I'm pretty sure of it. So that was an interesting time for me. And just all the other shows I've worked on. I've worked in feature film. I was on a show, you know, I've worked at DreamWorks, I've worked at Lucasfilm, I've worked at a lot of different places, and usually I am the only minority in the room. And it's not just, you know, a minority, it's also being a woman as well. It's a combo of both, you know. And I feel like sometimes that does work against me. I definitely feel that sometimes. Anybody else would like to comment on their experience?
Jaren?
My experience at the studio that I was at was I was basically the diversity hire, and it wasn't like a secret. It was like you know why you're here, play your role. So I was the only black woman. I wasn't the only woman on my team, but I was the only black woman on my team. I would say my biggest issue was being the diversity hire. So when it came to like projects and stuff, I pretty much got the work that nobody else either wanted to do or wasn't really interested in. I was always left out of the communication. Like, for instance, my whole team went to a con, and I didn't find out until after that they all went to like an animation con. Just little stuff like that. And it was so ingrained in their structure that it was no point in bringing it up. No one really felt like, if I brought it up with HR, they were just like, what's the big deal? You have a job.
I do think it's sometimes very much taken for granted, because I have felt some of the same way in different scenarios. Actually, recently on a job that I was on, definitely, I felt like sometimes things were kind of kept, you know, from me, you know, and me being, like I say, on the level that I'm in, that's really kind of hard to do, because I knew if it would have been if I would have been a white woman, it would have been different. There's definitely a lot of scenarios where I felt that way. And I will say also, just being a woman, period, I've been on shows where I felt, you know, like I was a glorified secretary.
There's a lot of dismissing.
You know, yeah, and that's definitely there. You know, I offer my opinion on something and I'm dismissed, you know, or not really, or interrupted, not even allowed to finish, you know, my sentence, because, you know, the man will talk over me. I've definitely felt that way as well on shows. I say all that, but I also have to talk about the fact that, yes, I've gone through some experiences where I didn't feel like I was being heard. But at the same time, after 20 years of being in this industry, I do feel like I've, you know, come a long way from Chicago to Los Angeles, and I've done a lot in my career. I've worked, now I have about 25, 30 films, shows under my, you know, my belt. It's been a struggle. I maybe haven't climbed as fast as some of my, you know, co-workers. You know, I do definitely think some of that does have to do with, you know, me being a woman first, and then also being a minority second. But, you know, I've had a good career considering all of that. I've just had to work harder than everyone else around me. It has led to some really great opportunities. I too have worked overseas. I lived in Singapore over 10 years ago, working on an animated series. And then recently, as early as last year, I was working in Malaysia as well, and I didn't get back here until December, you know, but I was over there all of last year working on a show. So I've really had some really great experience. I've traveled to some really great places, and it's afforded me things that, you know, I might not have been able to do in other industries. So I do appreciate and I love, what I do for a living. I definitely think there's room for improvement, though, in regards to our voices being heard as women as well as minorities. And the other side of this is, I think there is some entitlement that goes on in the workplace when it comes to our coworkers who say they don't see color, but they do.
I just wanted to hop in real quick and first of all, I forgot an integral person in my journey, Carabo Laguela. Hello, Carabo. He was my first Black person from school, my TA, and my first mentor. Thank you for watching. And then AJ Moore. But as we continue to hear the panelists, please talk about the camaraderie of the animation industry and the camaraderie of Black women, and we'll get into other stuff later.
Yeah. For me, I feel like most of the camaraderie has really been from, I would say most of my career has been just starting over, doing one type of entry-level position after another. So my camaraderie has been just other fellow entry-level PAs or runners or stuff like that. And that's really been supportive once I got in the studio and feeling like, is this like microaggression in my head or is this really happening? And being able to lean on my peers who were also basically like on the same employment level was really helpful. As far as camaraderie with Black women, that really mainly started digitally for the most part, because like in art school and in most of the studios, like we've all been saying, I've been like the only one. So it's just been connecting like Jaren and Deborah. I finally met Jaren this year in person, but I still haven't met Deborah, and now she's across the country. But just like learning about you guys and then connecting with you all on social media has really helped to even give me more exposure to other Black women in the industry. And we are always super supportive of each other. Anything anyone's doing, we're retweeting, reposting, resharing. We're like, hey, look at this wonderful, amazing being. Like, you need to support her or buy her stuff or listen to her. And Deborah, like your videos, I tweeted this week, have really been saving me, as I've been like listing, like, here's the top 3 videos you need to watch if you want to talk to me, because she's saying literally everything that you probably want to talk to me about. And that's really been like an awesome space to be in, especially like recently.
Oh yeah, definitely. That pretty much the camaraderie it's been really cool. Like the internet is a powerful thing because I'm always just kind of like sliding in somebody's DMs like, hey, I see you work in my industry. Let's be friends. And most everybody is pretty like welcoming, warming. It's amazing to see like just not being afraid to shoot your shot. Like I know like not too long ago I hit up Shauna Mills. She's an amazing animator, storyboard artist. And she set up time with me and walked me like through a whole, I guess you could say like a whole portfolio review. And I thought that was so cool. And had I just been afraid to just like say, hey, you know what I mean? I think it's really, really cool to see how embracing other women in the industry can be.
I've had, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I've had a really good experience, at least superficially, because I often question what's going on behind the scenes. But people are very kind to me. I get along with people really well. And one of the things I've noticed through the years is the lack of the diversity is getting better. Everything is getting better, but especially the lack of women and the lack of Black people, especially Black women. As far as the Black women I've worked with, we've all gotten along really well, and we didn't work near each other, so we didn't have a lot of opportunities to interact. I think 1, maybe 2 were actually in my department in animation, and that makes me sad that there aren't more. I worked in London, and in London it was really interesting because the dynamic was different. While Black people had very similar experiences their notions about it and the dynamics behind it were very different. But I have not been aware of the online community. I kind of had my head in the sand, and I definitely want to look into that and be a part of that.
I definitely appreciate that as well, and want to be a part of that as well. I think that given the current times and things that are happening right now, if you're going to do this is the time, to do it with, everything going on. I do think that there's not a lot of us and we're not connected. So also that's why I think this is good, because one thing that I've tried to make an effort, to do is as a producer, when I do, which is very, very rare, meet another producer that works in animation or visual effects, I definitely get their number, I connect with them. And I've tried to bring us together um, and to talk about these things that we're struggling with in the industry, because before I met them I didn't know anyone like them and there was no one to share this with. And so there's a group of us, a group of women that I've met that are producers in the industry, and we get together every now and then, and it's really nice to be able to talk with them and to hear them and their stories and the things that they're struggling with or they're going through, so that I know that I'm not alone. That helps make me feel supported in my role, and I definitely, some of the things that maybe I was on a job and something was said to me, or I was treated a certain way and I didn't really know exactly, wasn't sure, but didn't sound right. I'm questioning it, and then, this group of women that I've connected with, when I meet with them and they tell me they've experienced similar things, and I know, okay, it really wasn't me. I'm not reading too much into this. That is really what was happening. And it's just really good to be able to, because I try to be fair to everyone. I was raised, um, uh, to see things, fairly amongst everyone, and we're all equal. And, no matter, where we come from, our background, culture, you can have a piece of the pie too, kind of thing. And you can be anything you want to be, kind of thing. And that was kind of, the 80s deal. Um, but as I've grown through the industry, I feel like if there is things that are being said, it's subtle, but it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always know if I, how to take some things, if I should take them, you know, at face value, or if I should, recognize there's a deeper agenda behind what was just said,
So to speak.
yeah. And so sometimes it's hard because, at at the very core of who I am, I came into the industry not as a producer. I came in as an artist. I started as an artist. It is a craft for me that I've wanted to do since I was 6 years old. And so this is not something for me that I um, take for granted. This is not something for me that I just fell in because I had an uncle or whatever. I came out to Los Angeles knowing no one in the industry, starting from scratch, having to make my own contacts, having to do things like what I'm doing here right now when I first got to Los Angeles 20 years ago. And here we're, having this panel, this format, doing things like this, and going to all these type of things 20 years ago, trying to meet the right people, trying to get my foot in the door. I don't take any of this for granted. Every job I get on, I work twice as hard. I feel sometimes as the next person because I am not privy to the conversations that are going on in some rooms, and also because I don't necessarily get offered the opportunities that other people get. So I'm constantly proving myself, constantly. And it can be pretty tough, when you see people come in to the industry after you and they know somebody and, they get promoted or moved forward, or they get the mentorship. That's the other thing. I'm really big on mentoring people, below me, because there's only I can count on one hand, and not even the whole hand, of people who have extended themselves to me to help me throughout my career. And I think also there's more of that needed. I go to schools to do that, elementary, junior high, and high school, and college, to try to, expose, people of color to the industry and let them know you actually can have a job doing this. I've had kids say to me, "What? You can actually have a job doing that?" And then I'm like, "Yes, you can." So I think as far as getting the exposure and mentoring people and reaching out to people and building a community, I think that's what we're kind of lacking, is a community. And so, which is why I agreed to be on this panel, because I think that's very much needs to be more established. And I'm starting to see it now that all the stuff is going on, but I wasn't really seeing it before now.
And we can help y'all, me, Monique, and Jaren can help y'all get plugged in digitally, because we got all these, we not going to see you everything because it's overwhelming for us, but we got Discords, we got Facebook groups, it's a whole thing. I'll pop this question in from the audience, because a few of us have had this experience. How has your experience differed working overseas versus in the States? Do you feel like you had better treatment in one place over the other? For me, I'll start, because 10 years ago when I was in Korea, I always said, like, for me personally.
Are you guys getting like a click in the background?
I don't know. Just mute if you're not. I'll just mute people when they're not talking. I don't know. But for me personally, I don't know. I might put a mute. Okay. For me personally, can you still hear me? Okay. For me personally, it always felt better being an international token than being a black in Korea than being a black token in America, because I was like the first Black person to work directly for their studio. There were producers that worked for Fox and worked for Warner Brothers, who worked directly for them. But I was working directly for Digital Imation, and they would have studios come and walk around, and they would show me off. But it didn't feel mired in like whatever America got going on. It just felt like they were proud and like, hey, we got a foreigner. Look at this. And so it always felt better being international. Now, being in Asia and the idea of the one blood and all that stuff, you still endure discrimination. But people still like going overseas because it's not the same as America. It's like it's discrimination essentially almost everywhere. For a Black American, it's what's that saying? You have no home, because even on the continent we're called white because we're American. So, but I definitely, it wasn't the same. If anybody else wants to, I don't know, August, I know you said something earlier.
Yes, I actually touched on some really great points that made me think about that. It definitely was a different feel. There's definitely discrimination and racism, but one of the things that I found really disturbing from the standpoint of being an American is that racism tended to be more educated in the UK than here. In other words, people...
It's very polite.
Well, it's not just politeness, because the thing I was telling somebody just like yesterday, that people in Britain can be very blunt, and things are kind of handled like, I don't think there is such a thing as political correctness there. And like one of the biggest problems with political correctness is not that people are policing whether you're politically correct. It's the fact that people have to be policed to be politically correct. But I remember a friend of mine, he didn't work with me, but we hung out a lot. And we almost got in a fight because he was like, "What are you?" And I mean, I was, I wasn't aware of my gender identity. I presented as a man, but basically he was like trying to figure out my ethnic background. And I was like, well, I'm Black, and both my parents are Black. And he was just befuddled. And he's like, he kept trying to figure out like where the white people were in my family. And I got mad. I was like, look, I'm American. Mass have been in all our cabins. It's just a matter of how many times he visited, but he was taken aback. But, as far as working, one of the things that I noticed, especially with Black women, the Black women in America that I worked with, I said they weren't in animation. What I meant was they weren't animators. They were, in production, which I think is fantastic. There are people who I work with who are very high up in the food chain, Black women, that I'm so thrilled that they're there. And there were artists. There were more Black female artists than I have come across. Animators, actually in the animation department. But yeah, I did have that otherworldly. There definitely was a difference, in how I was treated, both from the standpoint of the fact that I was treated differently than everyone, and the fact that I was treated differently than I am here when I'm treated differently than everyone.
Dawn?
I can't really say that I have been treated differently when I was overseas. I've done it twice now. I didn't really feel it. That was, you know what? I take that back. Not so much because of a minority, but more so because I was a woman. That's what was where I did feel like there was a little bit especially because this last time I was in a Muslim country where women cover their faces and they aren't really allowed to express, themselves as much. And so definitely over there, I did kind of feel like there was a little, I think because in America here, Americans, period, all of us, no matter what color we are, believe in the freedom of speech. And we believe that, we can present as who we are, and, and that's just, how it is here. It's just certain liberties that we're afforded, no matter, like I say, no matter what color we are, or what race we are, or I'm sorry, what gender we are. Whereas when I was over in Malaysia, I did feel like women were, there was just certain things that if you were a woman, you better not do over there. And so that I would say there, but that's a cultural thing that goes far beyond anything that we've experienced here, in the United States. And I don't think it was towards me personally. I think it was just a culture difference, but other than that, on the jobs that I've had, I do feel like, I think when I go overseas, I am completely submerged in trying to adapt to their way of doing things. And like you were saying when you were in Korea, that there was a language barrier. There's definitely been language barriers to the places that I've gone. So trying to adapt to the language barrier. Some people speak English, some people don't. And just trying. I'm so submerged in that whole thing and getting adapted, getting settled into a new place and everything, that I don't think I'm actually thinking about these things as much because I don't really have time, to think about them. And then even once I'm on the job, it's again adapting and being able to get in there, even though it's a different culture, a different country, and trying to, do my job. I think I'm so focused on that. I hadn't really noticed. Maybe there was. I just didn't really notice it. I think, I don't know. I do think it's different overseas than it is here, but I don't know how to explain it. But I wouldn't say in a negative way. It's in a positive way.
Yeah, I want to
For the
pop
most
this
part.
comment up from when August was speaking. But something else I noticed about living in Korea was that because they have the mandatory 2 years military experience for men, that culture is kind of ingrained in all of their companies. So when I went to weekly meetings, you had to bring your notebook. Why do I have to bring my notebook? Because I can't understand nothing you're saying because you're speaking in all Korean. I had to literally sit there I think we had weekly meetings on Monday, and I had to sit there and listen while I didn't understand because that was what they did in the military. Like they all had their notebook. They all had to come to their weekly meeting, but I'm just like sitting there like, like when I was in Korea, I used to like not paying attention to anything because I didn't understand what nobody was saying. So I next want to go to, I want to start with Monique. What are some of your experiences you've had because of your identity? Whether it's like not being sure or something because you were a Black or a woman, earlier mentioned the glorified secretary, sexism, sexual harassment. What has been some experiences you've had because of your identity?
Well, I actually just saw this tweet yesterday that was about basically people projecting that you either have an attitude or something because you're quiet. So if anyone knows me in person, I am a pretty quiet, often shy, reserved speaking person. At work, I'm just like here to do my job. And I do remember that they have been some occasions where some upper management people would kind of be like, well, what's the deal with her? She's not always smiley and bubbly and all this sort of thing, and would assume that like I just had an attitude and there was something always wrong with me. And it was literally like, you actually also never spoken to me. How would you really just come to all these conclusions about me when all you do is just pass my cube and that's like it, there's also I remember one occasion where there was a writer and like for like a week straight, I would honestly confidently say like a week, he would say hi to my coworker in the cube next to me, my supervisor, a storyboard artist, the directors, good morning, individual good mornings, and like never address me or say anything. And then I was like, so it's not because I'm a woman, because my coworker is a girl too, and the script supervisor is a girl, but I am definitely the only Black person in this side of the building. So like, so I mentioned something to my coworker friend, and I was like, just pay attention, like tomorrow, let's see if he says anything. And sure enough, he didn't. Said hi to like everybody, but me. And that's just like the kind of, like I was saying earlier, like microaggressions where you're wondering like, where everybody coming to these conclusions? Am I making things up? Like, what's the other reasoning for like all of this sort of stuff that I'm experiencing? And then even when I left the studio, I was pulled aside and asked like if I was leaving because I was the only like Black girl. I was like, surprisingly, actually, no, there's like a whole bunch of other reasons, which I was fine sharing with them. But despite what I was going through, that really wasn't enough to push me out of that particular studio environment. Mm-hmm. I think I answered your question.
Jaren or August?
I had a similarly interesting. So I was pretty quiet at work. I come in and do my job, but it's because I pretty much felt like after a while that my team just wasn't gonna interact with me, and I was just like, cool, I'm just gonna sit over here and do my work. But they had pretty much came to their own conclusion that I'm like, oh, she's really, really quiet. She's reserved. She has an attitude. She doesn't want to talk to anybody. She doesn't really want to do anything. She's in her own little world. But they didn't realize how active I am in my community. And I'm actually the opposite. I'm actually pretty outgoing. They just didn't make the effort to include me in anything. And then when I tried to include myself in anything, it was like, oh, calm down. You're a little aggressive. Or, oh yeah, I used to get that a lot. Oh, I come off as aggressive because I'm not, I don't know. I don't code switch. I don't really code switch when I'm talking. And I worked with quite a few white women, and they didn't really like that. They didn't like that I wouldn't like essentially shrink whenever I spoke with them or interacted with them. So they pretty much dismissed me after that. And then I know one day they were basically having the conversation. They didn't know that I was aware, but they were having the conversation about why I'm not, I didn't really fit the culture. I wasn't really fitting the culture. And I'm too shy and I'm not outgoing. And then you look up on the TV in the break room and I'm on the news talking about community engagement, and I'm just this big bubbly personality, and everybody's looking over at me, and I'm just like, I'm gonna go back to my desk and be quiet and shy and reserved and not communicating at my desk by myself. So it's interesting to see how I don't know if you guys get that a lot. I kept getting that, oh, you need to fit in more with the culture here. But I was also in an area that's pretty much conservative. It was like very, very red area as far as like Republican, super high Christian values. It wasn't a diverse area to begin with, just like the city itself wasn't a diverse area. If there were any people of color, it was because they were attending the local university. And they kept getting the feedback like, you guys need to diversify your team, you need to diversify your team. But they took it as like, well, we got one, so she checks off all the boxes. She's Black, she's natural, she's a woman, so cool. Got it all right here in this package. And then when I ended up leaving, they were like, well, do you feel like you fit with the team? And I was like, no, you literally told me I didn't fit the culture here. Like, it was only a matter of time before I was going to leave. And then it just got to the point where it was like, I didn't even want to walk in the building, honestly. So. But then you have to also make the effort, because I just think in the pipeline within itself, there isn't a lot of us, just period. Like, you're not going to run into a lot of women, period, and you're not going to run into specifically a lot of Black women. So you have to make that effort to just like build those networks. So like even with the pandemic, it pretty much shut everything down. Well, it did shut everything down and force everybody to be home. So I just took the initiative. Like, I reached out to Monique, I reached out to Deborah. I started like different group chats with different women, and we're not all animators. Some of us are background artists, some of us are producers, some of us do voiceovers and stuff, but I get us all in a group together, and every now and then I'm like, hey, do you guys want to get on a group chat? And sometimes we vent, sometimes we talk about the latest thing happening in pop culture, sometimes we talk about the projects we're working on, or we'll just shoot each other notes and be like, hey, I got approached for this gig, do you feel like they're offering me enough? Do you feel like I should ask for more? Or do you think I should apply for this opportunity? Can somebody look at my portfolio? Just little stuff like that. And I was able to build that outside of work. So I wasn't at work like, well, why don't I have this network? I've created it myself, essentially. And I feel like we all got to eventually have to make that effort. We're all going to have to make that effort at some point. That number is on
August?
I'm on the outskirts of every demographic I'm a part of. And one of the things, there are a lot of things about my job and my situation that make it hard for me to interact with other people. All the animators in my company are in San Diego and I'm in LA. I'm with all the motion edit people, and they're awesome. They're very kind to me, but they go to meetings and I'm not part of that, so I'm there by myself. With the animators, when I do go down to San Diego, there's a huge age disparity. I'm usually, at every company, almost every company I've worked at, I'm not only older than the people who report to me, but I'm older than the people I report to. And so there are so many areas of non-commonality. And so it's really difficult because there are things that I feel like, I wonder if this would be different if I wasn't Black. There are things where I say, I wonder if there'd be this tension if I wasn't non-binary. But there are also things that I say, like, you know, is my age, you know, alienating me? You know, there are not as many opportunities for me to interact. So that's a factor. I've been invited to stuff and I can't always make it. And I always feel guilty because I'm like, okay, here I am concerned about these things. And then I'm not taking these opportunities. But, you know, there's so much that goes on. But I had, at one of my jobs, I had a fight with my boss. And when I say fight, we were both yelling. We were both terribly inappropriate. We were both unprofessional. And it was a white guy. And I remember we had this thing that kind of built and got worse. And now it's much better, but there's still a lot of issues that we both recognize. But I remember in one of our very contentious calls, you know, I was frustrated. I was affected by what he was saying. And he told me that he could hear me getting angry. And I was like, whoa, I'm not angry. You know, by the time we went back and forth a couple of times, I was angry. But it was just like I felt baited, you know. And not every job, but the jobs where I've had people under me, you know, people will say, oh, you know, August is a teddy bear. August is so sweet. August is, you know, all these things. But I'll invariably get something that says that I'm intimidating or that I need to work on my communication and interpersonal in contentious conversations. And, you know, one of my jobs, a white boss, you know, where I was called out for my aggressiveness, there's a white boss who could be heard 2 offices away yelling at people in a closed office. And I'm just like, what does his review look like? You know?
Dawn.
I'm sorry. Can we repeat what the question is again?
What are some experiences you've had because of your identity?
Well, for me, my background is that I'm biracial. So I've always had an identity problem from the time I was a little kid, just based on that alone. You know, so you know, my mother was Greek and my dad was African American, and I was code switching all the time. From the moment I was in the house, I had to talk a certain way, and then when I left the house, I had to talk a different way. So I've been code switching for a long time because when I was in the house with my white mother, there were certain things that were expected from me. But then when I went out to the streets, into the neighborhood with all my African American friends, there were certain things that were expected from me. And I am one of those people that have friends from, you know, all parts of the rainbow, but I had when I was a kid, and I do now. But I've been code switching for a long time, so I guess for me, this is not anything different because I've been doing it for a really long time. I do feel, you know, like I've always been made to feel since I was a kid that I wasn't accepted either way. So I kind of went on a journey by myself. And I made that decision when I was in elementary school that this is going to be a journey in life where I'm going to have to just go my own way. And I've been doing it pretty much ever since. Because I knew then, you know, we're talking the 70s. I knew then I was never going to be accepted. It became very clear to me then. So I guess working in the industry, I treat it kind of the same way. I know that I'm never going to be 100% accepted. And I do too. Even as a producer, find myself being quiet sometimes in a room. If I'm in a room with other producers, if not so much when I'm in a room, with people that I'm mentoring that are below me, because like I said, I'm really big on, training and mentoring and giving people the tools that they need to succeed. That's important to me. But if I'm in a room with my own peers, there are times when I also do get quiet. And I think it all relates back to, my experiences, even as a child growing up, when and it's the same thing for me now. It's really nothing has changed for me. Um, uh, the only difference is I'm, in corporate America, you know, um, but I will say, growing up in a house where I had to speak one way, and then when I went out into the world, I had to speak another. Um, Maybe it prepared me for this. I don't know. I struggle with the whole thing because to the core, I don't feel like it should be different. I feel like I shouldn't have to code switch, but that's pretty much, the way that it's always been, and I accepted it a long time ago. And in regards to fitting in, I am a very outgoing person at the core of who I am. So I don't really have a whole lot of trouble as far as getting along with people, as far as, you know, I have that type of personality that's very bubbly, very, you may not know it here, but when I'm on a job, I've been told this, that I have a very bubbly personality, very friendly personality. So I don't really have issues with that. And I think that's helped me actually, given, my background. But it is, no matter which way you cut it, it's if you're a woman and if you're a minority in the animation or visual effects industry, you're not going to have the same experience as your peers who are white American. You're not. And that's the reality, and I accepted that, like I said, a long, long time ago, and even my mother, who was a professional woman, and back in the 70s, she knew that even though she was, going to a job and she was a white woman, she knew then that people weren't going to accept, the fact that she, had a Black family. They weren't going to accept it. So she didn't shove it in people's faces because she knew they weren't going to accept it. So I think that when you're working in this industry, I think you have to kind of achieve a balance, if that makes any sense. As far as, yeah, sometimes you'll be quiet, like I've heard you all say here, when you're in a room, because maybe you're feeling not 100% comfortable, and that's understandable. But I think there's a balance when you also have to find those moments where you can speak out and express yourself and not be worried about being judged. I think it's really a matter of reading the room and who's in the room, and understanding who's in the room, and knowing when those moments are and when they're not. And it's just something, instead of just taking one extreme measure or another, you have to find a balance. That's what I'm trying to say. And I just want to add in there, as a producer, one of the things that I would love to change is when I am looking to hire people, I don't get resumes from minorities, and it's very discouraging.
Can we just touch on that? Because I know with a lot of Black women that I collaborate with, and I just know a lot of us, it's not necessarily shrinking, but a lot of us feel like for some reason it's been drilled in us that we may not be prepared or we may not be as advanced or ready for the opportunity. So like I'm always sending people stuff like apply for this, reach out for this. And they're like, I don't know if I'm good enough. I'm like, if you don't send in the portfolio, I will do it for you. I have your email address. Just I want us to be more vocal. Like there's nothing, like you were saying, there's nothing wrong with sitting back and kind of like taking the quiet approach as far as reading the room. But once you got to read and you know where you're at and what's going on, don't be afraid to stand up and let your voice be heard. There's so many dope Black women in animation, not just animators, but all throughout the pipeline that people don't know about because they're very quiet and reserved. They're kind of like tucked away in their own corner of the world. I'm like, y'all gotta start saying it with your chest. Like, let people know that you're here.
Yeah, Dawn. So, can you explain, what a producer role? Because I remember a few weeks ago I ran down a lot of some ideas that I had for something to a friend of mine, and he was like, "Oh, that's like a producer." I was like, "I don't know what it is. I just got ideas." So, can you like run down what a producer is and how, if you were to get a resume, like if someone was to have some particular experience, this is what would look good for being a producer? Or can you just kind of go through that?
Well, as a producer, I'm usually basically managing an entire crew, and that can range anywhere from 40 people to 300, depending on what the show is and if it's feature film or if it's TV.
So in other words, you're the captain right now. You're the captain of the ship.
I'm basically the captain of the ship. And I am basically guiding people along. In addition to dealing with, numbers, money, cost, I'm also dealing with personalities, artists, production staff, getting, if there's any bottlenecks in the pipeline, getting that sorted out, getting people the training that they need if they need it, artists and production staff. There's so many facets of it. I'd be here all day if I went into too much detail. But what I will say is when I am looking to hire people, I am usually looking to hire people who, depending on the show again and the level of experience, which we usually determine before I start looking what level of experience that we need. Sometimes we need entry level, or more often than not, we need senior, talent, mid to senior talent. But sometimes, we can go the route of getting, entry level and maybe pairing them with senior talent so that they can get the mentorship that they need and rise to the occasion of the work that needs to be done. So, those are scenarios like that we do that as well. And usually when I'm looking for people, as you all know, there's different disciplines. So I'm always if I'm putting things out there, I'll put out, I'm looking for an artist that can do blah, 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 blah in this discipline. And I need a mid to senior, or I need a junior level or whatever,
What happened? Dawn, you're frozen. So, we'll wait till she gets back. But so my experience of things that I've had because of my identity, like if you want to get really into it, I got 2 videos on my YouTube channel, and I still got part 3 to publish. So I've spent minutes talking about my experience, but yeah, not knowing whether something is happening because I'm Black or in the secretary piece. The first time that happened to me, it was actually beneficial because I got to be in the room with a bunch of high-level people who were in the animation industry. And so I got to see the behind the scenes of some things that was going on. But at a different job, I remember purposely, like it was just 2 of us, and my coworker was a white male, and they were like, "Does anybody want to take notes?" And I was like, And they're like, Deborah, I'm like, why did you, like, I did not volunteer. Why did you volunteer me? Why don't you volunteer the white man to take notes? Like, so, and, you know, in that I'm a Northerner, I'm very direct. Sometimes I stay quiet because I think for 20 minutes of how to say something nicely, and I feel like it's still not nice, so I just be quiet. And so that's where my being quiet, like I'm naturally quiet. I always tell people I'm not shy, I'm quiet. I just don't feel the need to talk all the time. But a lot of unfortunate things of, you know, people calling me mean because I'm direct, which direct does not necessarily mean rude. It just means like you don't have all this flowery language around.
You're not sugarcoating everything.
Yeah, I just say what I mean. I don't mean anything by it. I just like to communicate what I mean. And so a lot of times I kind of don't stick up for myself. Somebody asked that question earlier about feeling the pressure to speak up for things in your office, but I don't speak up for myself. There was a incident at my last job where I was made very uncomfortable because as women, you understand in the male-female dynamic that men test you and see if you're the one to play with, like if you're the one to take the bait. And so this was a married man. I did not give any signals to anything because I don't do that. And we went to lunch and he's like, "Oh, you fine." I was like, "You don't got to say that." And he's like, "Yes, I do." And so there's this idea that because you're a man and it's on your mind, you have to say what you're thinking. And it's really not necessary. Like, you do not have to tell me anything about how you're attracted to me, or if, particularly if you're a married man, but you have to read the room and understand that not everybody, it's not always appropriate. So because of all this mired of like being called mean and trying not to come off mean, I stuck up for myself that little bit in saying you didn't have to say that, but I kind of had a pity party the whole weekend because I didn't fully stick up for myself because I'm so concentrated on being nice that I didn't cuss him out. Whether we were in a public restaurant or anything, like I did not stick up for myself, and it took me the whole weekend. On Sunday, I sent him a message of how I felt. I didn't give you any signals that made that appropriate. And, you know, he's ex-military, so he's like, "Got it. So no apology? Like, you're not going to apologize?" Oh, okay. And then on top of that, being a Black woman who we care for everyone, I didn't tell anybody at work, but I told a couple people, and they're like, "Oh, why don't you report him to HR?" Being a Black woman, I'm in the South, and if I report this Black man to HR, it's going to be bad for him. So being Black and being a woman, I still care for you more than you care for me in that situation. So it's all crazy. And yeah, so if you want any more on my journey, I got 2 videos. I got to edit part 3. Like, I sat down for an hour on everything. But has anybody ever
on this question?
Yeah.
So at my old job, the last film that I was a PA on, the main character is a Black man for a majority of the film. And there's also an Indian, racially ambiguous Indian character. Now, when the script was more in the earlier stages of pre-production and we were watching the animatics back, watching this character on screen was just like so cringy, because all of the writers actually were white men. The directors were white men, and the character is Black, and it sounded like white people trying to be Black. Like, they should have just made the character white, really, if that's what they were going to do. So I felt conflicted, like, well, I'm one of the only Black people again in the studio. The studio had a couple hundred employees, maybe like 8 of the employees were Black. And I didn't feel confident in speaking up because I'm a production assistant. How am I going to tell these directors that's been working here for like 15 years, whatever. I had a good relationship with the story lead, but I still felt very nervous in even approaching him one-on-one about that. But the studio did have a setup where employees could send emails, and it was compiled, and I actually was the person that compiled them and printed them out for the directors. And I was pretty transparent, like, this, first off, this character is supposed to be maybe in his early 20s, and he sounds like Samuel L. Jackson, and this doesn't make any sense. Like, he just would not be saying some of these lingos. It sounds very dated. I don't know what movies and where you're getting your references for these quirky lines, but it's all bad. So it is very hard to speak up sometimes, because you like don't want to speak out of your position, but then you have like a duty to representation at the same time. And what, again, like I mentioned earlier, was helpful was just also having other PAs that were very supportive, and they'll be like, well, I would say something, just tell me what you need to be said, I'll say it for you, whatever. And they were fearless, and they didn't have to worry really about their race being in the way of that, or being penalized even for speaking out so much. But yeah, it's hard to speak up, and sometimes you have to find a way that could be a bit more comforting to you, or it's helpful to have someone that would speak for you in those instances.
I think, just like to piggyback on what you were saying, I think a lot of, well, specifically my concern as a Black woman is I don't want to get tagged with that you're a Black woman stereotype, or she's mad aggressive. Like, I'm not aggressive at all. You just don't like the fact that I challenged you. But then it's like, damned if you do, you damned if you don't. Because even if you deliver it in a way that's not aggressive, that's really polite, but hey, I'm bringing this to your attention, normally this character wouldn't do this, or this design doesn't really make sense, is how dare you challenge the fact that I did something? Because most of the time when you're bringing this up, you're bringing it up to a white man. They're not trying to hear nobody challenge them on anything. So it's just like, and then there's also the instance where, Monique, you have people to like advocate for you. I would have people tell me that they would advocate for me, and then they would misconstrue my words, or they would throw me under the bus. And I'd be like, all right, so now I gotta go at everybody. Cool. It's me against everybody. Let's go. But you know what I mean? Like, you don't want that. Once that label gets stuck on you, or she's angry, she's aggressive, she's difficult to work with, she doesn't really fit with the culture here, it follows you literally everywhere you go. Unless somebody higher up sits down and say, no, this is actually what's going on, y'all aren't being receptive to it, that label will literally follow you everywhere. And sometimes it hinders people from moving up. Like, Don, I know you were saying, like, sometimes you guys are looking for people that are higher up. A lot of us get stuck, particularly Black women get stuck in entry-level positions, and they'll get stuck there for years, off of just the simple fact that you challenged one person and they didn't like the fact that you challenged them. So now they've made it their mission to make sure you don't excel at anything you attempt to do moving forward.
Yeah, I actually have a situation right now, and I struggled with whether I was going to even bring it up here. And it's a situation where I was brought on to a project, and eventually brought on to a project with a client that actually asked for me. I was not on the project, but another supervisor was on it for the majority of the time for the project, the majority of the actual production time. But I ended up doing more finished minutes of animation. And there's a policy that two people in the same department have to be listed alphabetically. So despite the fact that I did more finished minutes, despite the fact that my name alphabetically comes before this white man, I was listed second. And I've been struggling with it. And even on social media, one of the things is that, we're friends, and he's saying, how proud he is of everybody and all this kind of stuff. And the only time he's ever mentioned me has been when I posted something about the game, and he was like, thanks for helping us get across the finish line. And, I don't think it's intentional, but I believe it's that bias. And I feel like I'm going to be labeled that complainer, that bitchy person, when I say it. And in the past, when I have addressed things, especially things that were racial, people would say, like, why don't you just let it go? And I'm like, I'm not holding on to it. You guys are. If this situation hadn't happened, I wouldn't be talking to you about this. But there is definitely a stigma when you stand up for, any marginalized group, but especially Black women.
Okay. I do want to kind of go into something that, that, because I'm always a thinker, I'm equal size analytical as I am creative. So sometimes I think of like our role in things. So has anybody thought about how being Black or being a woman has hindered us from, not from the system, but from what we do? So an example, we're always talking about the wage gap. And something that I realized is that, yes, we are being discriminated against, but also as women, we don't ask for more, or as Black people, we don't ask for as much as a white person would ask for. And there was, when I was in New Orleans, I used to attend these women in technology, conversation circles. And there was a woman who worked for GE, and she told a story about how she was applying to some job, and she asked one of her white male counterparts, like, how much would you ask for this position? And it was like way more than she would have asked. And she submitted it, and she got they accepted it. She didn't take the job for a reason, but she still felt uncomfortable in that situation. And for me, I was like, if that worked, I would ask a white man every time, like, so how much would you ask? Okay, thank you, because I would have never thought of it being that high. And so has anybody ever thought about, like, the way we're socialized or whatever, like that was the reason you had any situations and you're trying to work through that? Or does anybody have?
I think so. One thing I've noticed, I think this is more of a Black thing than it is a Black man, Black woman thing. I know in the workspace where I was, if they visually saw too many of us coming together to congregate, it was a problem. They didn't like the fact that we were like communicating and talking about wages and talking about opportunities and different things that were coming up. But I learned that when you do that, you have to figure out how to build that outside of work. So because like a lot of us are like realizing that when we have our conversations in our group chat, like somebody may lowball this person one number, but they may offer someone else triple what they offer the person that they lowball. You can't figure these things out or figure out what the number actually is or how to go about getting the opportunity if we're not talking to each other. Like one of the things that I say frustrates me just across the board, I'll meet so many different creators and I'm like, well, yeah, this person over here is doing this thing. And they're like, who's that? And I'm like, what do you mean? It ain't that many of us. Like literally you could probably get all of us and maybe fill up the stadium. Like there's not enough of us for us to not know of each other. And a lot of it is just you see the person, you like their thing and you move on. Connect with that person, like just don't be afraid to build those networks and to connect, because I think that's how we can challenge, because we know Black people, Black men and women are lowballed in wages, period. Black women are even lower in that stance. The only way we're going to combat that is if we remove because I feel like the only advantage that they have is the fact that they know we're not talking to each other, so they know that they can offer a number here and then turn around and go over here and offer something even crazier. Because like say someone offers Monique a number, Monique quotes them, well, this is my rate, and the rate isn't the number that they're trying to pay. They're like, cool, I'm gonna go to this other artist and cut them down by half and see if they'll take the lower number. If I'm already talking to Monique and I know what her number is, what number did you give them? I'm gonna give them the same number you gave them. So that either way, no matter who they decide to give the opportunity to, they're gonna pay that number. You see what I'm saying? Like we got to figure out our own way to kind of like work around that, because I'll be honest, with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of these, we're supportive. We're going to do these portfolio reviews and we're going to make more opportunities for Black people in animation. I want to see if y'all still have that same energy 6 months from now. because a lot of y'all are talking a real good game right now, but I'm not really seeing any results. And I know it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I really do feel like a lot of companies or a lot of people that have had these opportunities to make these changes from jump never did. I don't think they're going to plan on doing it anyway. The only way that we're going to get these changes going is if we keep our feet on their neck, honestly. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if we're all talking and communicating with one another. Like if we see an opportunity coming up and you pass it on to the next person, be transparent. Like, hey, this is the number that they're offering me. If they come to you and they offer you something lower, don't go lower than this number. I know for a fact that they're offering this number. They'll hit it. Like I know this all the time. I had a white friend that they were talking to. They didn't like the number that they gave her. They came to me, cut the number in half, and told me they didn't have no budget. But they were totally prepared to offer double what they were going to pay me to her. But because we're talking to each other, I can hit them with her number. You see what I'm saying? So it's like now you're forced to do right. Essentially, you're forced to do right. Like I don't see. I don't know. I'm so frustrated. I can't even get it out. I'm making myself mad. Sorry.
Deborah, can you repeat your question? I feel like I want to answer, but I want to make sure I'm like answering it also.
Also,
So,
I just want to say that every time Jerron speaks, everybody goes silent. I can't hear anyone. And then as soon as she stops, now I can hear everyone again. I don't know what that issue is, but I just want to put that out there. I heard nothing anyone said each time.
We heard you, Jaren.
So you saying when Jaren speaks, you don't hear anyone else? Okay. We're all muted when Jaren speaks. So when we talk, do you hear us? You're muted.
As soon as she stopped talking and everybody start talking, I hear everybody again.
Okay.
But that's happened twice, like 2 times when she talked, I couldn't hear anybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. We'll have to troubleshoot that in the future. Monique, were you about to say something?
Oh, yeah, I just was asking if you could repeat your question.
So how has being Black or a woman hindered us from not from the perspective of the system, but from us, how we're socialized, like how we do things, like we're there is the racism and sexism, but we're also keeping ourselves back, kind of.
Okay, so I can't answer the question, and I support what Darren was saying because I was thinking something else, so that's why I wanted clarity. So then I completely support what Darren was saying.
Also, I see when I was at different places, even Black men like ask for things. Like there's this like confidence that it's like, okay, that's why that person gets more. Because sometimes we think because we're a woman and we think it's because we're Black on the outside, but it's actually that the other person is just asking for more. I remember I had an ex-boyfriend who's in the financial industry, and it was a Black-owned company, and most of the people were Black, and they had a white guy start working there, and when there was times when he would ask for office or ask for this, and as Black men, they were like, okay, I guess, but he asked for it. We're not even socialized to like ask for things. We always think it has to be given to us. You can ask. That's how asking you shall receive. And so we think we have to wait for someone to think we're worthy rather than just asking and all they say is no. So the next question, how do we incorporate and make space for more Black women throughout the entire pipeline, not just animators or writers? How can we amplify? Did you have something, August?
Yeah, I'm really sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
I wanted to speak on that because A, as a man, I didn't have that confidence. And B, I've only asked for a raise twice in my 32-year career. And the first time I was told that because I was going from film to video games, that the price scale was different. And the last time, basically, my email got lost. I would have done it in person, but it was during COVID. And, the timing wasn't great. But when it came time for the review, my raise was significantly less than what I had asked for. And my boss told me that he hadn't seen my email. And after the meeting, I resent the email. I said, this is for your convenience. And I still haven't heard anything from him. But I never had that confidence that you're talking about. And when I saw that question, I was like, well, I'm more in line with the socialization of not being that confident. Thank you.
It is one thing I've learned, and I think this is a white male thing. If it's one thing they got, it's the audacity. Start having the audacity, like have the audacity to ask for that raise. Because now what I tell myself is, what you gonna tell me? No. That's the worst you can tell me is no. You know what I mean?
Confidence of a mediocre white man.
There's actually one more thing about that that I thought was really interesting, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Over the years, parenting and child rearing has, drastically changed. But in recent years, I've seen white people who, their kids are like wilding out, screaming, cursing their parents out, little kids, and just doing whatever and not getting reprimanded. And if their kid comes afoul of anyone else, their parent is going to tell off that person and not their kid. And very recently, in recent years, I was in a bank and this Black child was acting out, and every Black person in the line was shushing the child. And I was like, wow, how much of that are we hurting ourselves with? And I feel like the Black people were right. I feel like, yeah, kids should be disciplined. I don't mean beaten, but they should fit into society. But audacity of a mediocre white man, that it starts young.
Because they're gonna eventually become adults that kind of behave the same way. Because according to psychology, we're the only age of when we had our last trauma. So a bunch of 12-year-olds masking ourselves as adults. But so the next question is, how do we incorporate or make space for more Black women throughout the entire pipeline, not just animators or writers? How can we amplify their work and or their voices? Anybody?
And I'll just, because that was my question that I had just to everybody, because I feel like a lot of the reasons why things aren't as diverse is because one thing I've noticed is either they'll take a Black woman or a Black person and they'll make them the CEO. That's it. You won't see anybody else trickle down the line. Or they'll take them and they'll put them in that entry-level position, and it'll take them 20 years to move up to the next level. There's no in between. I feel like we'll have more diversity if there's more Black women writers, producers, voiceover actors. Like, why is the same Black woman voicing every Black character in animation? Why did you see the same writers writing for all of the shows? Like, we need more producers, background artists, texture designers, all of it. Like, I feel like the whole pipeline needs an overhaul. And I'm like, how do we get to the point? Because I know one thing I kept seeing on Twitter is a lot of people were saying, just particularly Black women were saying they're stuck in entry-level positions and they don't know what it's going to take to get them to move out of those positions. Like, they're training people that are essentially bypassing them when they should have been the ones to get that opportunity. Like, I'm not trying to be out here training someone else to do something that I should be doing. So I'm just like, what do we need to do, or what is it going to take for us to even just like bring that up?
So I guess this is the proper place for my answer. And I was seeing some comments talking about, like, with Black Lives Matters and studios doing a lot of performative work. So for me, part of the reason why I left my old studio was because of salary, right? The entry-level salary for a production assistant was like $32,000 a year. And there was just no way for long, and I was doing that for 2.5 years, that I could really sustain myself on that type of annual salary. And then I had a job interview with a different studio, and the coordinator role was $40,000. And that was to move across the country, no like relocation fee, no anything. And the position wasn't even completely guaranteed because I was coming on at the end of the movie. When the movie finished, there was no certainty that I would go on to the next project. So I feel like if studios are really trying to make a space for Black women, and particularly knowing that we're constantly underpaid, there has to be a collaborative effort on raising the base salary for entry-level positions so we could even stay in a studio to try and move up. Like I couldn't even stay. So I am one of those Black women that constantly find myself in the loop of being a production assistant or a secretary or whatever at each different studio because I'm just trying to make a little bit more at the bare minimum, whatever they keep saying. And their defense is, this is what we pay all our production assistants or whatever. But I understand too, some production assistants may come from families where they had that financial advantage, where I didn't, and a lot of my Black peers don't. If you come from inner cities or have immigrant parents or what have you, you may be the first one to get this far. And if the studios really want to support, they do have to look at like saying, this is what we may have to do. And even with my like promotion that I got, by the time I left in 2.5 years, it was like only $1,000 more than when I started. So I can't, how is that sustainable? I'm working like a part-time job, trying to do freelance things on the side. I'm not showing up to work as a good, effective employee because I'm just constantly trying to make sure I could help my family and just get to and from work financially, you know? So, I think that's one thing that just studios in the bigger sense need to do to be able to really sustain retention of having Black women so we can move up.
I just want to comment that that particular issue that you're referring to is an industry-wide issue, which actually has nothing to do and with race or gender. It is truly a problem in the industry, period. I just want to add to that. When I first moved to LA, I struggled with a similar scenario as you. I needed to make more money. And in my situation, I was a single parent. And on top of that, and I started out as a PA just like you. And you're talking about the money you're making. Imagine trying to raise a child who's 10 years old on top of that income. That's what I was faced with. One of the things that I did do, I did take side jobs. As I mentioned in the beginning of this, I started in this industry as an artist. So even though I was going down the management path, I was still taking on artist work on the side. And at that time, I was working as a digital Photoshop artist on the side. That was my side gig. And luckily for me, when I had lived in Chicago, I worked for a company. I did this for a company. And when I told them I was moving to Los Angeles, they said, oh, well, we'll just send you the work there. And you can still do it for us, from home, from in Los Angeles. So I would do that side work in addition to being a PA. And that is really honestly how I was able to get through. I would recommend, I don't see that the industry itself is going to really change when it comes to that. I mean, look how long it took them to raise minimum wage in the country, so I don't see that really changing. But my advice to you is to definitely take on side work. And if you can get something, on the side, like I got, where you can maybe do it from home. Because I know the other thing about being a production assistant is you're usually working longer hours, and there's not a whole lot of time to actually go get a job, I would say that little side gig I had was pretty much, my savior. I had also worked as a graphic designer as well back in Chicago. So I was taking on that work too, in addition to the Photoshop work, and then going on set and being a production assistant. That's what I was doing. So that would be my advice, because I don't really see that changing. And just like you, I was always looking to make more money. I got to make more money. And there was a job. I had a very good job, at a really big studio when I was a PA. I love that job, but just like you, I was like, I cannot survive off of this income. So And that was even with, you know, in that particular case, they were paying me so low. They're one of the lowest paying studios in the industry. So they were paying me so low that even with that side job, I was still, you know, struggling. So that would be my advice. If you can do that, that would probably benefit you, because I just think the industry has this. One of you spoke of the military and how the military is ingrained. Well, I don't know how much you know about the film industry, but the film industry was based off of military men who came back from the war and started their own businesses. So it's kind of aligned, kind of like that. A lot of the, ideologies of, how it should be is, comes from the military. So I don't, and that being said, the military, has their way of doing things, and so does the entertainment industry. If I could change it, I definitely would. I would be one of the first people to change it. There is one studio out there that I know of that is trying to make changes, um, and uh, and they are paying more. They're one of the higher paying studios now in the industry, because they're trying to make changes. But they're the exception to the rule. They're not the rule. And then when everybody found out they were paying more than everyone else, everybody wanted to work there. So they've been inundated with people trying, basically jumping ship, leaving other studios to go work at that one studio because they pay more. So that's
And
the other
that's
thing.
important. And it doubles back to what Jaren was saying, as well as just talking and sharing this salary information, and having the confidence to, in an interview, even if it's the industry standard of this is what they pay for these type of roles, still ask anyway. And just have that communication open with each other and still try. But we're aware of what it is. But if studios are saying that they're standing in solidarity, I strongly believe it's on our generation not to ease up on that and to hold them accountable for the rest of the year, for the rest of the years, for the rest of our lives. As long as we intend to work in this industry, we want to see the results of what they posted, the black square with the white letters, a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Well, I do think that one studio is definitely making a difference for. I have quite a few friends that work at that one studio, and one of the really good friends I had working there. I mean, she was making an incredible amount of money, more than she's ever made in her life at that studio, and I thought that was amazing that they were willing, because she went anywhere else she would not have made that much money, so I thought that was amazing that they did that. But with that being said, I think that one studio is trying to present a new uh, pay scale for the industry. But I have to say, with COVID hitting the way that it just did, and so many people out of work, I don't see necessarily the salaries going up right now. Actually, I see them probably going down.
I feel like if anything, COVID just
because,
highlighted
there are
jacked up system.
fewer jobs than there are people who are out of work. So the competition is going to be fierce now, for those positions. So I don't know. Although I will say this, I'm kind of on the fence about it, because because of COVID, at the same time, there's going to be more work in the animation industry, because right now live action is not doing too well. So there's going to be, more work in the animation industry, but I think there's still so many people out of work. I'm not sure how that's going to balance out. So I'm really thinking that it's not going to go up. It might even go down at this point, which is hard. But I will say to you, network. If you can get a side gig, that's really the best. Everybody that I know, in addition to myself, when we were at the level that you're at as a PA, that's what we all did. We got a side gig. That was how we made it. And even some of the people who I get what you're saying about the others who are entitled, like, for instance, when I was a PA and I was working at this one studio, the one that was the lowest paying in the industry, and I'm looking around, I'm a single parent, I'm barely struggling. I'm not even making enough money to bring home to feed my child, you know. So I'm really struggling. And what I noticed is there's, you know, like you said, there's a lot of people who maybe they were living at home because they couldn't afford to get a place because that's how low paying the PA position was. So there were some of my peers at that time that were living at home with their parents. And of course, I didn't have that as an option, you know. So there are definitely those people who, like you say, that are coming from a place where they have the support, be it they're living at home, be it their parents are giving them the financial support to help make up for the lack of income in certain areas, you know, make up the difference, you know. But then there's people like me who don't have that kind of support. And so, and they're all doing what I was doing back then. They're just picking up extra gigs on the side. My battery's getting low, so I'm just warning you ahead of time. If I drop out, that would be the reason why.
Okay.
I feel like the COVID and all that just highlighted an already broken system. I really like that the studio you mentioned is challenging the norm. Hopefully, most people tend to follow their competition. So hopefully other studios will get in line and raise their rates. But when you think about the amount of money that these films churn out, y'all can afford to raise what you pay the people who make these films. Like, these films turn around and make millions and sometimes billions of dollars. Like, I can guarantee you the people that worked on Black Panther probably didn't even see a third of $1 billion that film turned out just in its first weekend, its first round of release. And I feel like if you're gonna have all these people working to the bone, because people are in this all across the board are working hard. I feel like their pay should reflect that. The executives, their pay is just where they want it to be.
Excellent points all around. I mean, there were a few things that got me thinking. One thing that was really interesting in London, and I don't know how much of this was a factor in the diversity of the women working in the art positions, but everybody has to come all the way through the pipeline, no matter what they're doing. So everybody who started at that company started as what they call a runner, which is what we call a gopher. And then they moved into the next, part of the production line. And what's great about that, one, is that, you have this sense, at least for the people in that system, that everybody's paid their dues. But you also have this sense of, people have a better understanding of what everybody else is dealing with in the pipeline. Again, I don't know how much of this versus just racial politics, was a factor, but I definitely saw more Black women, on the box doing, the actual production work over there. The other thing that was touched on, I think Monique mentioned it, is the opportunity. One of the things that is heartbreaking for me, I've been on several animation reel groups. Like, the company is, gets their animators to look at animation reels to determine who should be hired. And it's so rare to get Black women's reels. It is just like non-existent. And, as far as
but that's the same thing I was saying about resumes as well.
One second, I gotta wrap up by 1:00. So I just want to just mention that a nice thing that would be cool for more support and amplifying the idea of community. Pollyanna rose-colored glasses thought that I have is, listening to Jamie Foxx talk about what he did for other musicians, like become stable enough to, if people want to move to LA, they can stay with me for a little while and kind of remove that privilege that other people tend to have. But I do want to ask a last question, and if you could keep it to like 30, I mean keep it short because I need to wrap up by 1 p.m. But whether you continue thinking about your identity or you step outside of your identity, what do you hope to see for the future of animation? Anyone can start.
I want to see a production of all Black women. I want to see production of all Black people. I'm talking Black directors, producers, writers, production assistants, storyboarders, revisionists, color artists, background. I want to see that. I want to see what a film would look like if you go ahead and give us the opportunity. I'm not trying to do a movie where I'm a co-director to another white man. I want full control of my story and my narrative. I know what my people want. Just give me the opportunity and let me run. Mic drop.
I second that.
Anyone else? Yeah, I want. Oh, Dawn, go ahead.
For me, being that, like I say, I am a producer, and oftentimes I'm looking for resumes, and I'm always hopeful that, I'll get resumes of minorities, not just, of one particular, race, which is why I go into the schools and educate younger people so that they know that we exist and you can actually work in animation. I'd like to see more diversity, and I'm doing things to implement that, like I just mentioned, and trying to get people together. Like I said, with the producers group that I've united everyone. I've been the one connecting everybody. So I would just like to see diversity more so, not in the artists as well as in the production staff and in more leadership roles. That's really, really important, because even when I do see artists that are of minorities, they're not in leadership roles. So that's what I would like, maybe even starting a mentorship program for minorities, that want to rise up and become supervisors or become producers.
Yeah, for me, as some of you know, I got a lot of ideas, but it would be cool to have sustainable animation studios where not only as we continue in Black animation, I don't want to duplicate what's already done. I want to do it how we do it, like that community feel. I feel like in animation and tech, there's also always this idea of learning where you have to be alone, but Black people are very community minded. And some of us are introverts, some of us are shy, some of us are loners. But for the people who are not, that community aspect of learning, and then the sustainable model where we can have pockets of things where maybe we have an animation studio that teams up with a Black-owned theater, that teams up with a Black-owned restaurant, that like the sustainability idea where we don't have to live in LA or New York, and more opportunities and whatnot. So like going to the next level of when we create it, put our stank on it, essentially. And I just want everybody to give how to find you. We'll start with Monique. Can people find you after this?
Yeah, so I have it. It's over here. Yeah, Simply Robotics on Instagram and Twitter. Through that, you'll find my website, my videos, my podcast. You'll find all that stuff. So Simply Robotics, just as it says right there.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Oh,
you're on mute.
Yeah, I was about to put my email in for my name, but yeah, I am MX August Davies at gmail.com. Please drop me a line. And Dawn, I want to apologize. You definitely mentioned the lack of things coming from, people submitting their reels. I wasn't trying to discount that. I was trying to corroborate that. And I wanted to say that education, I meet Black would-be animators who don't have access to a computer, don't have access to Maya. If there's some way that we can improve that.
Oh, real quick, I just want to shout out you guys for coming together and doing this. Thank you so much, Deborah, for bringing us together.
I definitely wasn't discounting anything you said about the reels. I was just saying, in addition to reels, resumes are also something that I would like to see more of. In regards to being able to get in touch with me, LinkedIn is a good way. IMDb, I'm on there as well. Well, that's more so to see the things that I've worked on, but LinkedIn is definitely a way you can contact me through LinkedIn, and it might take me a day or two to respond because I'm not on there every day, but eventually I will.
Jaren.
Sorry. Thank you for so much for pulling this together, Deborah. You guys follow Black Women Animator, follow Simply Robotics, follow Diverse Tunes. There's also, I saw someone post, they were saying they were looking to connect. Also check out Black and Animated. Bree and Wayman are doing amazing things in that space. There's already things for you guys to tap into versus going and making all these different separate Discords. Tap into the silos that already exist. If you guys are looking to get on some projects and work on something, reach out to these different groups. I know I'm trying to pull together a project. Feel free to reach out to me at Jaren Merchant on all social media handles. Like Dawn said, don't be afraid to send her reels. She literally said she's looking for reels. She's looking for more diversity. Help her out. You got to give her the content. She can only do so much if you guys aren't extending your reels and sending her your work. Even if you send it to her and she says, hey, go work on these 3 things and come back, do it. Go do it. She's telling you what you need to do to get into space. Don't be afraid to capitalize on these opportunities. Right now, there's a lot of white guilt happening right now. Capitalize on it. When they crack the door open a little bit, go ahead and body roll through there and get what's yours.
And I am Black Woman Animator on everything. Thank you, August, for showing me that you could change in real time your thing, because I didn't know that if you could do that on StreamYard. So thanks for that. I want to continue highlighting people. So hopefully, I've already had Jaren on my channel, but hopefully I can highlight everyone on this channel. I'm trying to highlight Black animation professionals and I didn't find animation as a career till my senior year of high school. So I'm trying to introduce, I've been doing it for years, classes, workshops, all that stuff. So trying to introduce kids to it, trying to get parents to understand that, to be supportive and whatnot. So thank you for coming. I want you to like so I know it's real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Seal the Deal, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And we'll see you in the next video. Peace.